ever. Like I think that they have 3 times the number of engineers. Like, it's like there's so many engineers. And so the thing is that Adobe, I think
but they're
Adobe,
all beholden to
grant. They're pretty smart people there. So anyway, the it just moves so fast. There's so many new features and so many new things coming out against it. And it's, the first version's always a little unstable, but it tightens up. The hard part is that the lift to learn Resolve is really high. And even I open up projects and I've done projects, a fair number of projects now in Resolve. Chris got to see me do my first one in Resolve. And
really?
That was my first time.
No, you'd done stuff in Resolve before I helped you.
Nope, I just converted files in Resolve until that project. So anyway, but I learned I learned fast. so anyway,
you're like the substitute teacher who's one chapter ahead in the textbook, aren't you?
A large portion of my life, I find that the most valuable drug for learning is adrenaline.
Fear.
So it's just adrenaline. It is like the magic drug to learn anything quickly is just get a lot of adrenaline going and you'll absorb it. So
I like the comfort of knowing something super well, where every keystroke is instinctual. I'm not thinking about how to do it. I'm just thinking about what I am doing with it.
The problem is that my job is to fix problems that no one's fixed before, and so I live in a world that for the last
you live on a whole world
2 decades
of thin ice.
Of just it's just thin ice every day. Like here's something that no one's ever done before that you've never done before, and I was telling somebody, I was like, well, we can do this, and he said, well, have you done it before? I was like, no, I haven't done it before, but nobody's done it before. Nobody's done this before. Like, so I've done all the pieces that are involved before many times, but we've never strung them together this way. But it works in my head. So it should. You have to get comfortable with discomfort. It's the key to the operation.
Stand by.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, Nick Jushchyshyn is going to be joining us, and he's going to be talking about photogrammetry, LiDAR, and Unreal Engine. So how do we take things in the real world and put them into Unreal? So it's going to be a really good second hour. I'm really excited to have Nick here. Also, if you are listening on our radio app, thanks. Enjoy. If you don't know what the radio app is, you can go to Discord. And in Discord, under the Alex announcements, there's a link to the test flight of it. It's only on the iPhone right now, but it'll be more available in the future. But right now, it's on iPhone, so you can find that in Discord. If you aren't in Discord, you can find it on the email that we send out. And if you're not in the email that we send out, then you can go to officehours.global. Sign up. So that's the string to get to the radio app. But we think that the radio app is pretty exciting, and we're pretty excited about doing it. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we got?
First one up from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. The Opal Webcam claims to be, quote, the first professional webcam, unquote, and is paired with Opal Composer, MicMesh for audio. Curly cable, $250. Is the claim justified?
Go ahead, Courtney.
No. It claims to be a professional camera. It's a little webcam with a little lens. And I looked at the specs here. The sensor's okay. I think you have to use it with their Composer, which is their computational photography program that goes along, that it pairs with. It only has USB-C out as a webcam and no HDMI out. It has all these little holes on the front here are a microphone mesh. I think it has 3 microphones behind that mesh, not 20, whatever you think it is. And when you get down to the where was it? Anyway, I was looking at the specs on the microphones, and the audio range was 100 to 10,000 hertz. So it doesn't even go above 10,000 hertz on its audio, which is going to make dialogue nice and clear, but it's not going to hear a lot of everything.
It'll make it
else.
clear, but it doesn't. There's a certain air to things and a resonance that you get above 10,000 that I feel like you lose when they cut it off. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, it's why do you put a big curly cord right at the back of the microphone? That's going to weight it down. And I don't think their claim is justified. I looked at that and I agree with Courtney.
I think that the other thing is, to me, I have bought many, many Brios, but to me, it's now basically between the Insta360 Link and the OBSBot Tiny 2. Those are the two. Once you pass those, you go to a Super 35 APS sensor. So that can be what Courtney's using, or what I'm using, or or what Chris is using, or what John's using, or all of us, except, well, I don't know what you're using, Paul. I think all of us are in some kind of APS side. So anyway, so that's the so yeah, I don't think it's I think that those are the two right now. Like we'll watch. I wish that those two, OBSBot and Insta360, could really take a lot of ground if they put an HDMI output, that turned these things in and made the sensor just a little bigger. So I think they could go. I do think that once they get to $500, they start competing with APS cameras, but at $400 with an HDMI and a slightly larger sensor, they could, like even a 1-inch sensor, which Sony makes. Sony's been making this 1-inch sensor for a long time. Get an umbrella, processor for it, you'd end up with a great camera, and it would still fit into that price point with the HDMI. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and with the DSLRs, if you can get a kit lens, you'll have a mini zoom on there, so you have some adjustability without compromising your resolution. Because all these little webcams that claim to be professional have a 4K sensor in the output 1080, and they do a zoom and focus basically by taking a smaller portion of the sensor.
I think the Link and the OBSBot have optical zoom built into them, I believe. No, maybe not the Link, but I think the OBSBot might.
Not the Link,
so.
Yeah, I have a Link.
It's
4K sensor.
Yeah, and the microphone is so far away. I've been being trained on office hours to close talk the mic.
Like, stop listening to anybody who has microphones in their webcam. Don't do that. Don't just get a microphone for the microphone. Like, it's not good enough is the some people say good enough is the enemy of great. I say it's the enemy of humanity. Anyway, go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm still looking for the connection between the quote, the first professional webcam and the device. What are they saying? The sound, the picture, the quality, the cost?
They sat around in a table, and they were like, "What can we call this?"
Well, they say it's less than 2% plastic, and I think that
there we go.
That percentage that's plastic is the lens.
All right, next question.
And it's from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, asking, Rode Wireless Pro, worthwhile upgrade or yet another new device we don't need? Thoughts? Is timecode really critical for that many workflows?
So one of the interesting things about this Rode is that it records locally as well. So I assume that they're paying the price to Zaxcom or whatever so that they can do that. And so I think Rode now does it. I think DJI is now doing it. I think that Deity Mics, I believe, has a local record, which is, these are super powerful, but it really becomes more important. I'm sure the reason they put it into timecode is that people who are creators who are starting to use these were like, it's really hard to line this all up later. And they were like, well, we can make it easier if we sync it to timecode. What happens is that, and again, if you're not very good at it too, it becomes hard to get the sync just right. If you've done, I spent 5 years only doing production without timecode. And so it was like, we just got really good at lining it up. Like, and we would, have people clap at the beginning and do other things. And we would just, at some point you could just line it up and just kind of figure it out, but I think that it does make it faster and easier to have timecode by a lot. And especially if you've got a bunch of these mics or a bunch of tracks, so much easier to have timecode. So if you're doing a lot of this, it is worth it. The other thing that the thing that's the most important is that 32-bit, the 32-bit local record, because what that means is that, you're in the field, you're a creator, you don't have a sound person, and you're being able to clip this thing on and be able to get something. If things got a little too loud or a little too soft or whatever, you've got tons of data there to grab onto. Now, that doesn't mean everything will work. You have a signal to noise ratio you're still working on. I think this one's in the mid 70s. So it's not quite as good as what you'll see in some of the preamps and other mics that you would have at a professional level, but it's good. And So the thing is that these, and what I did notice when I was looking at this is they have a headset mic now that's built for this. So it's a headset mic that is actually built for that Go, and it's about $300. But that's the first one I've seen for this. We've been using cheap headset mics, because it was basically there was the DPAs and the Countryman, and then it just dropped off really quickly to like Polo, whatever that we got. And so there's a $300 headset mic that could be reasonably good, especially if you are, you're a trainer or you're doing yoga or you're doing or cook, that kind of thing. Having that little headset mic could make a huge difference. And so I'm really curious about that as it relates to this. So I think it's a really interesting puzzle. But the reason that local record is important is, like, let's say you're walking through a crowd. You see this a lot. You do a local record of the person. They're walking through a crowd. They're 50 feet off. There may be breakup coming in, to the camera. But now you have that local record. You resync it, and it all comes back together. So it's a pretty cool setup. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, one of the things that is super interesting is as our industry advances, a lot of the foreknowledge and problem solving that we relied on in the past becomes superfluous. And any of these new digital mics that digitally connect, I'm looking at the web page with people, just a single digital cable into a phone or something like that. Think about all of the stuff that you don't have to worry about in terms of like gain structures, like it's the output of this transmitter, the right impedance and gain going into the blah,
yeah,
blah, blah. But it's there.
I will say though that as watching this, there's so many what I would call ball handling skills that we learned, in many places that when you don't learn those, you just do a lot of things that you still end up with all the good things that you have now. You still end up in a hole because there's just things that just made that work better. And so things that are okay quality, now you're fixing them and you don't know why, and like I look at this as this is a graphics day, and I look at this as, when I do 3D, when I work with 3D artists now that just came out of school, like they have no sense of how, like they'll be like, well, I was rendering for 4 hours this afternoon. I'm like, you do not render during the day. That's what you do at night. Why would you do that?
I think you've said that to me, Alex.
You do not render in the middle of the day. You render it. You build your 3D models. You do little tests. You do little animations. You do little postage stamps. Everything else. You think you got it going, and then you punch it out and you go to lunch, or you punch it out and you go home. But you don't waste your day rendering. And so anyway, so I think that's the. But I think in the same case with audio and video, I see a lot of folks that got started that didn't go through 10 years of doing something. And there's just so many, lazy, which is the exact opposite of what we see in sports. I was just watching somebody run yesterday, and I was thinking about, I remember looking at people run in the 30s, in the Olympics. And this was like a high school track meet or something that just came up on YouTube or something like that. And I realized that high schooler that's not even making state could outrun the Olympic runners, 80 years ago, by a lot. And it's because of technique. It's because they understand technique. They have video analysis. Some of them in college, they have motion capture analysis. And I kind of feel like we're going the opposite direction, where we just keep on getting lazier, not better, and not really paying attention to those things. So hopefully we can keep on.
It's that whole thing about, when you, and this is a phrase that I coined this phrase this morning. If you give everybody a hammer, you're going to have a lot of sore thumbs, and as we make the tools more accessible to more people, two things are going to happen. One, you get more stories. Some of them are going to be really great. And two, you get more stories. Some of them are going to be really, really bad.
And you see this when Photoshop came out. I mean, there was a lot, like the Cytex operators had the same thing that I had, which was the Cytex operators are like, oh, we had to go to school for this, and we had to learn all this stuff and everything else. Yeah. And these little I came into Prime Sports Network. I paid $350 an hour to do ads in Photoshop. I got hired to do other things, but I got hired to send out letters that said you win, and I turned it into a Photoshop job. But I sent, I printed a whole ad at pure black because I didn't understand what dot gain was. in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I still remember that. But the so I think that all of us can keep on thinking about, and it's one of the reasons we have this show, is so that we can keep on talking about some of the underlying principles, that are going on, so that when people are learning, they can be also deepening that understanding of why they're doing those things and why it matters. So we're looking at new stuff, but we're also like trying to fill in all those gaps, because those gaps are really hard to find. I mean, usually if you find them on YouTube and they're actually there, they're usually spread out between 30 requests for subscriptions and a long open that takes like 4 minutes, and it's just hard to find the information. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Back to the Rode Wireless Pro. I think it's the third version of that microphone, or wireless microphone. Here's what it comes down to. It comes down to, how does it sound? How does it sound using their microphones and their device and their recorder?
Well, you don't have to use their microphones, though. You can use other microphones.
But I'm just saying, how does it sound with this particular package? And if it sounds great, then it's a nice box. But if it sounds horrible, there's an issue.
To go back to the issue, though, is that, to go back to that, it looks ugly. Like, they keep on showing people clipping it on, and you see people do this. You see them take the Rodes and they just clip them onto their shirt, and you're like, wow, is that ugly? Especially with that big Rode Zero thing on it. You're just like, really? That you want to, like, and you'll see videos like with millions of views, and you're like, that's what you chose to do. Really? You're NASA, man. Anyway, so the clipping on thing, and it doesn't sound very good when you clip it on, in my opinion. And then so I mean, and I think that when you put a good mic on it, it actually sounds reasonably good. But I think that you need to do that. I'm super interested in the Rode with the headset as kind of like the cooking kit. You give somebody. We're always looking at how to build this cooking kit. Eventually, you're going to see us do tons of cooking. But the idea, though, is having this little Rode that you pop in, that you can pop on and have a headset, would make a big difference. I'll go with Courtney.
And looking at it, I don't like this. Like you say, it's the size of the cases haven't changed. In fact, I think they look a little bigger. They do provide it with these two microphones, which normally sell for about $100 a piece, although the total package is about $399. And having to do with the 32-bit is recording. I'm not sure what it's transmitting, though, what the receiver is.
Oh no, it's not transmitting that. It's transmitting something else. That's just a sync track at that point. Like, you're just using that to check things on your camera.
No, 32-bit recording, not the timecode. I'll talk about the timecode in a second.
You probably have to jam it.
You have to use Rode Central, is what they say. So you can't do any of the settings on the device itself.
How do you jam it to the camera?
You have to hook it. Well, this is my question, is that Rode Central may just be pulling time of day off the internet or something, and time of day is not timecode. It is timecode. It's real-time timecode, but most timecode's 2997, so it's 5994 time base instead of 60. So it won't stay in sync if you're using real-time
drop frame.
Right, yeah, or drop frame, unless you're using 2997 drop frame, which is normally not used in production.
Well, in
normally
live,
not used in production. So in live production, yes.
Live production,
not in recorded production.
Yeah, here you go.
If you're doing a multi-camera recorded, the whole idea, live production, you're not going to use the timecode because you're not doing post.
We get all this.
So there.
We get all this. We get all these discussions.
The timecode. It's live.
This is a huge discussion. Every production we do, if you have a bunch of film folks, we end up with this thing where the live folks are going, we're using time of day drop frame. And they're like, you can't do that. And we're like, yeah, we can. Because it's the only way to keep the time in sync. All right, next. And by the way, we're not.
Anyway, I like the size of the DJIs better because they're smaller.
Yeah, did they do 32-bit?
Yeah, they do 32-bit internal recording too, and so they're.
I have to say, DJI is hitting on all cylinders right now. When you look at everything that they release, you're just like, whoa. Next question.
I read in 30 frames, just so you know. Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois, asking, is Zoom or any Zoom apps able to send live captioning as a separate feed?
No, I don't think it does. I think it outputs in its own little window. And I don't know if Zoom OSC is capable of doing that, of grabbing that data. I don't know if it has that data. I feel like it should, and if not, we should request it, because if you're able to get that data out, then you could deliver it to something else. Now, that window, we've done stuff with other things like Bing, not Bing, but Team Skype for Business, I think was what we actually were using. And so Skype for Business and Google Meet have great, translation and captioning that are built into the apps. And so in a pinch, we've actually taken those and just windowed them and keyed them over what we needed to do. But getting the raw text out has not been something we've ever able to do. It's there. It's floating around in that app as raw text. The question is whether you can get it out. And the only way I would think that it would work would probably be Zoom OSC. But I don't know if it supports that or not because we haven't needed to do that. Usually we do that as a whole separate process, to keep it so that we have more control over it. Next question.
And we have a softball comment from John Preto in Las Vegas asking, problem solved with Blackmagic Design DaVinci yesterday. I'll share.
Mr. Preto?
Posted the question on Sunday, and Alex said, you'll solve this over the next couple of days. I solved it with the help of the Blackmagic forums, and you're going to laugh when I tell you what it was.
Can you explain what the issue was?
Yeah. So I was trying to record voiceovers into DaVinci using Fairlight. And the mic would not arm. None of my inputs would arm into Blackmagic, into Fairlight, so I could do voiceovers. And what did it turn out to be? It wasn't any conflict with ACE or SoundDesk or anything else.
No
track. It was the security settings in Mac OS. You have to turn the microphone on in the security settings.
You had to go to Resolve in the security settings and say, this can use my mic.
Exactly.
Oh man, well, it's a good one. It's a good one. That will save somebody else a lot of time. Thank you. Thanks for coming back with that. Next question.
Mr. Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and right here on our panel, Zoom shares rose as much as 8% in extended trading on Monday after the video calling software provider announced fiscal second quarter results that exceeded analyst expectations. Revenue, $114 billion versus $112 billion expected by analysts. Comments?
Go ahead, John.
So Zoom's financials look strong. Unfortunately, Wall Street's not supporting them at their time. Their market cap now is the same as it was pre-pandemic, but their financials are strong. Their market cap now is about $20 billion. They could be acquired at that price level, so we'll see what happens. But their financials are strong right now.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, they look pretty strong, but I think there was about a 3% adjustment today. And I was trying to make sense out of the Motley Fool, reading what they thought of the situation. They always take me down this rabbit hole. When will I ever learn not to read the Motley Fool? Anyway, back to you.
Yeah, and I think you got a couple digits off there. I don't think it was. I think it was I believe it was 1.4 billion, not 114 billion. Because if they got 114 billion dollars in revenue, their stock would be astronomical. so I think there might be a couple digits off there. So anyway, so I think but I think that overall, the real challenge for Zoom is what they're really good at is the video part, and they're better at it than anyone else right now. And I think that they're caught up in a challenge of, are they going to continue to take that lead and expand on it? Is that an avenue that can grow? And I don't, I'm just saying that they could just keep extending their lead. What it appears that they're doing more of is trying to be like Microsoft. How do we be like Microsoft? And Apple did that in the 90s and it did not turn out well. So I think that that's going to be the challenge. Like, can they actually pull that off? Can they persuade people like me to do anything other than open this for a video meeting? Because now when I open up Zoom, there's this huge interface. It looks like, Skype had a baby with, Slack had a baby with, Teams or something like that. And it's just a bunch of stuff that I just turn off. I'm like, oh, I don't need that. And so, so I think that that's the challenge. Can they convert people like me to using the rest of the platform? I'm not sure that they can, but I'm also not sure that trying to extend their lead. But I think that the danger they have is that some of the other companies are coming up fast. Microsoft's not, I don't think Microsoft's video solutions are, competitive, and then I don't think they have right now. I don't know if they have the team to make it competitive, but I think, and they're the closest. But I was surprised the last time I jumped on a WebEx how much it had changed. Not that it's as good or even very good, but it was a lot better than it was, infinitely better than it was 2 years ago. So there are people who are spending a lot of money on this, and I think my biggest concern for Zoom is that they'll get distracted by trying to be the be all end all of office communication and they'll lose their lead in doing video. They have a great team to work on that, but if that team gets distracted, the liminal team is best corporate video team I've ever seen. And I've been doing this for a long time, like no close second, no ever that I've ever seen. So the liminal team is the team that makes this work. But if they distract that team with a bunch of other things, we could end up with something that's, they could end up losing that lead. So I think that's the real challenge for Zoom to go forward. But I don't think any of that's being calculated by these little analysts that, don't know anything about what they're investing in. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I don't think the being better at video is what they need to worry about. It's great for us. We lean into it heavily, of course. But what they really need to do is they need to deal with their customers at the decision makers. So I'm seeing it with companies that are just categorically blocking out Zoom for whatever reason. It doesn't matter why they're doing it, but Zoom has to figure out what those reasons are, and they have to address those reasons. If you are Ford in the 80s or 70s, whatever, and your Pintos blow up when they get rear-ended, next year, you don't have to worry about putting a better paint job on the Pinto. You have to convince people that they're not going to blow up, that you've changed the exhaust system, it doesn't ram itself into the gas tank anymore, and I'm sorry, I'm dating myself. And if they get rear-ended, they're not going to blow up. Okay, changing the paint doesn't help.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about that is that, this is my equation. Action equals possibility is greater than circumstance. You're talking about the circumstance and trying to push that circumstance down. And I don't know if they can do that. I don't know if that's going to be possible. But I do think by making the video products much better, you can get the possibility to get bigger than the circumstance. And the reason for that, the reason I say that is because we saw a glimpse. We're nowhere near where we need to be when it comes to doing, video discussions and specifically scaled meetings. And there's an incredible amount of possibility there. If we look at, if you just look at the education market is going through a moment. And this is the K through 12 education market. That is a $600 billion market, and what's holding back the math in that area is that I feel like no one's looking at. The math is that the voucher systems that are being rolled out are $7,000 a student, which is not enough money to do a brick and mortar school. Like you can't do a brick and mortar school at $7,000. You need $14,000, $12,000. Those are the numbers you need to get the brick and mortar school going. Yet nobody is serving that market with a tool that allows you to build the next generation of classrooms online. That is worth more than they made the last quarter every week. If they figure that out. And there are like 10 of those that are out there. If you figure out how to build truly scalable meetings, and events is not probably going to be that, and so the thing is, but truly scalable meetings, and they have the right team to figure these things out. They have all the stuff, but I don't think the answer to be honest is I just don't think that all this other business stuff, a lot of us just don't care about it, and most people are embedded. Like you're not going to move many people from Office 360 because they're in it. You're like, once you're in it, it's really hard to pry them out of that. But I think that building something that truly transcends the way we think about meetings, where you stop thinking about it, we're on our way there, and then we've all stalled, right? No one's doing the kind of work. People like us are doing the work for everybody else with hardware and calculating and figuring those things out. But Zoom is the heir apparent to do that really well, and I feel like they've slowed that down to do all this other stuff. And again, they look exactly like, Steve Jobs came in, and he did, he took 10 years of Apple trying to be Microsoft and just erased it and released the next Mac. He literally went back to 1987 and just, 10 years later, he's like, we're just going to ignore that decade, and then we're just going to release another Mac. Apple could have been where it was it could have done that Mac, much, much earlier. It could have kept on going, but it got lost, and it spent 10 years in the wilderness trying to be like Microsoft. And no one can be like Microsoft because Microsoft has scale. It has a scale that people just buy it because they buy it. They're not going to, there's an inertia there that Microsoft doesn't have to be good at anything to just keep on, kind of plowing through, and they do reasonably well on a lot of things, and they just kind of do reasonable, but they don't have to do anything. Everyone else has to be better than Microsoft to do it, and even then, you have this huge installed base that isn't going anywhere. It's kind of like why Final Cut should never go after the film market, is because they can have all the meetings they want with Avid editors about what does this have that we don't have and everything else. But the Avid editors are never going to give up Avid, until it dies. So you can sit there and try to put all those features in that Avid has, and then they're still going to stay there. And it would have just been a waste of energy to try to put all the features in that no one else cares about. And you've now taken your engineering team and spread it out over something that doesn't matter. And I think that's the concern that I have with Zoom. I still think, obviously, they're the best in the business at what they have. They have the right teams in place to do it. And the question will really be, leadership from the top about whether they can actually not try to do what it feels like they're doing right now. So
I'd like to point out something that we all just witnessed. My comment was about doing today better. And Alex's retort was, but let's talk about tomorrow.
That's all I care about.
I know. And I will say, Alex, and I've said this before, I used to pride myself in being the guy in our company that was looking over the fence to see what was coming next. And when we started office hours, there was some discussion. You got into, one of your sermons, and I was listening, and I realized at that point that you were the guy when I looked over the fence to see what was coming next, that you were the guy on the other side of that yard looking over the next fence. And what we just witnessed there, and Alex doesn't pay me to pat him on the back like this. What we just witnessed, I'm literally trying to fix today, and Alex is like, okay, let's let today die. Let's talk about tomorrow, though. And the thing about the school of the future, yeah, you're right. That's a bigger thing. And yet, we still do have to live in today.
Well, and the other side of the school of the future, by the way, is that, 87% of kids, or it's 87% of kids under 18 are using iPhones. What is going to happen? And they have no interest. All of the polling, they have no. The amount of derision that is thrown at Android, in high schools, and my kids talk about it. That's why I'm very conscious to it. Well, the green bubbles, and that this is just for people who are 50 or older. And this is like they they just the level of that. But the thing is Apple has locked that up. That's what we don't understand. Why do they have all these memojis, and why do they have all these little stickers, and why do they have Apple has just landed in this we're going to focus on 18 and under, and they are burning the future up for Android in the United States. Because they've just toasted the future by not paying attention to today. Apple is playing a 10-year game, or 20-year game, where they've just totally embedded themselves with the next generation by that little green bubble and all the things that they're doing. And I think that's what we have to always pay attention to with K through 12. And K through 12 has never been so flexible as it is today, in our lifetimes, and because of all the chaos that's going on, and it needs to have some chaos. It needs to change, from where it has been. And so I think that it's an exciting moment, possibly in a Chinese curse sort of way, but it's an exciting moment for that. But it's the opportunity, and that's just one opportunity that Zoom has in front of it. And it's just, anyway, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think feature bloat killed the video star. I think that Zoom may be approaching that event horizon that we call the Peter Principle, where they tend to expand beyond their level of competency. And as you said earlier, Alex, I think it made sense, is that what do they do best? They make video easy for everybody. If you add features like Microsoft tends to do, you're not necessarily making it easier or better. And I think that's the trap that a lot of people fall into. If you look at Apple products, they must fight tooth and nail for every tiny little menu item on every software product that Apple releases. It's just simple to its simplest mode. So I just implore Zoom not to go too far with the features. That isn't why we buy it. We buy it for its consistent ability to deliver a great conference.
And I get that what we're talking about is something that would take a leap of faith. What they're doing is what every analyst would tell them to do, is to try to take that market. I'm not clear that it'll work. And again, after seeing the Apple movie of the 90s. I feel like we're potentially in that. That's the challenge that Zoom has, and we could totally be wrong. They may turn this over and make a lot of money being the next Microsoft, but we'll see. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, what hardware would you recommend for experimenting with self-hosted LLMs and other AI technology on a personal level?
Go ahead, John.
Whatever you do, don't buy the NVIDIA Jetson. We bought one of those, and we could not get it working on any of the LLMs because the drivers are not released. Just get an NVIDIA 4040, one of the 4000 series cards, and you'll be fine. You can run any of the local LLM models on 4000 series.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but both stable diffusion and LLM models that you run offline require huge amounts of RAM and VRAM. And to run and learn those models, you're going to need like an RTX 3070 and 3090. Maybe
be patient.
Giving me the upside.
Or patient. Like you should be patient. Like these stable diffusion will work on a Mac Mini. It just takes a long time. Like you throw it in.
Like at least an i7.
Yeah, or you just let it sit there and cook for a while. I played with it a little bit. I did decide I'd rather just pay for Midjourney than to try to put it on my computer. But it did produce things, and I could train it. It was just that it produced them very slowly. Quick reminder, of course, that you can ask questions throughout the hour. So go ahead and throw your questions into Makana. First hour, you can have questions about general media production. That's what we're answering right now and kind of wandering around a little bit. And second hour, of course, Nick Jushchyshyn will be here talking about LiDAR and photogrammetry and Unreal Engine. So if you've got questions about that, go ahead and throw those in. And let's go ahead and jump into the next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas has a question. The other day, I asked about an all-in-one camera. People leapt. They leapt to the Sony ZV-E10, but that's not an all-in-one Think camcorder, a video-first camera with at least FHD live HDMI output for connection to an ATEM. Suggestions?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I've used a number of these Canon Vixias. This is the H100. That's about close to $800. You can get them refurbed or factory refurbished a lot cheaper than that. And they have HDMI output. The output is mini HDMI, so you have to get an adapter to go to full-size HDMI, I think, on this one. But it works pretty well. It has you're not going to get the bokeh of a single sensor, like a DSLR with a larger sensor. This is a small sensor, so you're not going to get that bokeh. But it's a lot easier to keep a lot of stuff in focus with without having to worry about the autofocus constantly breathing in and out and shifting focus.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I have the ZV-1, which is a predecessor, and it's a great little blogger camera. I have a lot of trouble using it for streaming because of the cabling setup on it. It's just really hard to attach the two tiny little mini cables on it.
This is the one we were talking about, the ZV-E10, and the thing that I've been testing it. I'm going to put it back into production here later this week. So this is a micro, and the advantage here was that this is from Mitch. This is getting this is a full-sized HDMI going to the micro, so I don't have to keep on pushing the micro in. And then power is coming from a thing which it actually has a little door at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, but there's like a little door down here that lets this cable come out. So it was really built for it. And then, I think this is we'll see. This will probably be my full-time webcam starting next week. So I had some power problems with it because I didn't have that battery insert. So yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think the range of webcams is broadening, and Sony is sort of latching onto that, especially with their ZV series. They have ZV series, like Paul has the ZV-1, Alex has the ZV-E10, as do I. And I think it's on the edge of being a little too expensive for a webcam, but it's giving us all kinds of neat little things like the great bokeh backgrounds, the ability to remove the lens and put a lens of your choice on there, and it's got a bigger sensor in it, so you have more flexibility there. But it's interesting to watch the trajectory of this business model that Sony is starting to reinvent, and I think that they've established they're going to be in the game. And of course, once again, it has that wonderful auto zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Sony has nailed this so far. They've really done a really good job. And there's things about, like, if I go out and record footage, I still find myself using my Blackmagic cameras because I have more scale. I have more things that I can, put together. So in the little world, the little camera, sub $10,000 camera. When I go over $10,000 for cameras that we rent, then I'm, using Aries and Venices and stuff like that. But in the smaller group, I think Sony has really nailed it. And they've also nailed it in the sense that they have gotten really good at outreach to the creators. They have this whole Sony camp, and they spend a lot of time in education. The autofocus turns out to be the killer app. I mean, I think that if Blackmagic could still take this, because I actually think the recording formats and the structure of the Blackmagic camera, the interface on the Blackmagic camera is better. In fact, I would say that I prefer pretty much everything that the Blackmagic camera does better than the Sony, except for the autofocus. Like literally, that's the only thing. That's the only hold. So what I think Blackmagic should do, of course, is hire 20 engineers and figure this out. Just figure this. Get
so
this
Alex,
working.
you're saying that you went to Sony only because of the autofocus.
I did. Yeah,
that's it. Okay.
Because I wanted a shorter depth of field. And I found myself, you watch old shows and you'll see me doing this all the time, trying to find my focus because, just the Blackmagic autofocus is so janky that you just can't, it's good if you're doing as a cinema camera, which is what they call it. If you're doing a cinema camera and you're someone's manually focusing it or you're managing it or whatever, the Blackmagic camera is amazing, and the recording and how it manages formats and how it does all the other things. And there's everything about it, the interface on the back, the LUT management, the integration with Resolve, everything is better about that camera except for the autofocus. And so when I go out and shoot stuff that I care about, still going back to and I have people or me or whatever that's going to control that focus, still using the Blackmagic cameras. Because I was going to go to the beach. We had a little rain over the weekend, but I was going to go to the beach and shoot this ambisonic stuff. And what I packed was my Blackmagic cameras. So it's not either or, but it is something that I feel like for the show and for things that I need. Like, I think that we had much more things in focus for the SIGGRAPH than we did at NAB or at Cinegear or NAB. Yeah, NAB, because we were using we were using the Sony camera instead of the Blackmagic camera. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
But all those are really more still cameras that do video rather than purpose camcorders.
Yeah, but those cheap camcorders, I mean, the camcorders under $1,000 are not.
Is Leo still using on the TWiT network? Is he still using the Vixias, the Canon Vixia?
The G10s, yeah, the G10s. Okay. Go
and
ahead,
they're
Paul.
720 though, aren't they?
They're 1080i. I think he takes 1080i and then converts it. Yeah, I mean, for a seated talk show, I think it's probably fine. But I wouldn't, and I still have cameras like that laying around, but I wouldn't.
Also, with their extended depth, they don't have the short depth of field that the others do, so you don't have to worry about autofocus as much because everyone's, unless they're getting up.
Sure, but then everything's in focus.
In with the range. Exactly.
it's like YouTube. YouTube has killed. It's been good that YouTube has kind of come back a little bit. When the Mark IIs came out, everything was so out of focus. It was just like there's a blur behind you, and somehow I think that when we see the auto blur from Zoom and Teams and everything else, I think they went back and looked at a Mark II at a 1.2. Let's make it super, and it's just too blurry back there. It's too much blur. I think Apple's built-in version in the new operating system is significantly better than everybody else's. If you tell it's a webcam and put that in there. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I think you solved the cabling problem. I think I'm going to try to apply what you just showed to my ZV-E10.
This is so what makes this work? What makes this work is this is a small rig. I buy every camera I buy a small rig for it. So a small rig. It's $50 more to get this little metal rig that gives me mount points everywhere, and I can I just order some more sprigs so I can put sprigs on this guy. And sprigs are the little cable management that I can do on it. And then this is a piece that Small Rig makes that it attaches to this rig. And this was Mitch's suggestion, and it works great. And so it does the micro HD, and then it's just an HD output. You're right. It's a great setup. But the first step is the Small Rig, which again I recommend for every camera. Like every camera I buy, I just put the small rig in it because it protects the camera. I've had the camera fall and hit it, and it just hit the small rig, and it was fine.
What determines whether you use the Sony versus the Insta360 for a show? What's your process of deciding which to use?
The Insta360 is if I want to do multi-camera. If I want to do multi-camera by myself, like of the cooking stuff that we're doing, or of interviews or something like that, and a little multi-camera thing, and I want to control all of them, and I want to reframe them and do all the stuff where it's either me or somebody else, and so that. It's a great little pack. I mean, I can get this down to a little, like a 1510. I can take a 3-camera shootout with me. And so those cameras work great for that. And the other cameras, a lot of setup, to make that happen. But then I'm also deciding I'm going to use Mimo Live. I'm going to, tie these in. I'm going to, build all the stuff inside of a software because it's USB. So I'm now changing my production workflow. But we were doing that a lot for the Michael Krasny's, for Gray Matter .show. We were doing using those at the beginning. Now we're doing a single camera because we really decided we don't want to bring people into the studio. We'd rather just do it over Zoom. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. How would you produce an Amazon product review with 2 products and no unboxing?
Okay, Paul, I don't know what you're talking about here.
Well, this came out of Amazon announced that they're going to give $12,500 if you do 500 product reviews, and they have to be about 2 products. Each review has to be about 2 products. And it's caused an uproar in their reviewer community. They're incensed, that Amazon would try to pay so low. But the challenge is, how do you do I'm thinking of trying it, trying to do 500 reviews. I don't know if it'll
give it a shot. The problem is that it's like, the issue is that Amazon wasn't paying anything before. Like, they were just Amazon, so if you're trying to turn this into a business in the United States, it's not going to work. You're not going to make enough money. You could do it in other countries. You could do something like that, but then you'd have to get the products there to review them. But you can do them all in one, you have to do them all, I would say, as a single camera shoot. You can't, or maybe a multi-camera, but you'd have to be able to do it all live. You have to do the review live, and you can't do it in post at all. So you'd have to figure out how you're going to do a live edit to do this stuff. But the thing is, people were doing video reviews before for free. Amazon just isn't getting enough of them. They're trying to figure this out. They've been, the Amazon Live thing has been a bit of a wash. And they just couldn't get the numbers there. This is another example of let's do something that we see. Everyone's interested in this because of China. Like in China, it is a massive, streaming about products and talking about them is a massive business. And people keep on looking at that and they can't figure out, how to crack that code it's like a $60 billion industry in China. And everyone's trying to figure out how to do it. No one's figured out how to do it here. Go ahead, Courtney.
If you have to buy 1,200, what is it? How many products do you have to buy, Paul?
Don't they send them to you or something? Or what's the deal? Paul,
it's 500
if you
reviews.
But do they send them to you? Do they send them to you?
Yeah, that's the question. You have to pay for the 500 items you're reviewing? Because if you do, that $1,200 isn't going to go very far.
Yeah, I don't know. I buy so much from Amazon, I could probably find 500 items in this room that I could review. So I could sit around and just at a table and just say, I like this, I don't like this. That's what a review should be. This is great. This stinks. And you could do 500 pretty fast that way. Next question.
Next question from David Brady in New York, New York. What are the implications of the New York Times considering lawsuits against OpenAI?
What kept AI has been floating around in the ether for over a decade. We saw it hitting, and what kept everybody on the sidelines was the fear of being sued, the fear of someone using it the wrong way, the fear of it getting out of the gate and going too fast. And so Google and Microsoft and even Apple sat there building up their tools, using them quietly in the background to figure things out and do all these other things. And then OpenAI just jumped out there and forced everybody's hand to move forward. And so now everybody's got to start putting it in. Now it's a race. But everyone is still going about half speed. It's kind of like one of those things where they're running and looking at you and running and looking at you and running and looking at you, trying to make sure that they're not going too far where they get sued and everything else. The problem is that there's a high probability that these lawsuits will fail. And so so everyone's kind of tepid about what they're doing. Like as fast as you see AI going right now, this is what it looks like when everyone's going half speed, quarter speed. Trying to make sure that they're not getting overextended for this lawsuit. As soon as these lawsuits start failing, which I think that there's about a 50, 60%, maybe 70% chance they're all going to fail, because I think that it's really hard to prove that them making stuff up from scratch, even though if it looked at something, because what they're going to argue is, well, people look at stuff all the time, and then if I read a bunch of books and then I write another book, does that mean about the same subject? Does that mean I copy those books if I didn't quote anything directly? It's a very complicated problem to ask. And I don't think that the current Supreme Court is going to understand that. I think they're just going to go, I don't think that this is a problem. But we could be wrong. So they're taking the risk of going down this path. If they fail, you're going to see what AI can really do. Like, you just have to understand, like, if these lawsuits, it's a huge risk to do these lawsuits, because if they don't succeed, they're going to get buried. Like, this is going to, suddenly there's going to be $1 trillion that just opens up out of the sky. So, to invest in these things. And so that's the real danger of the lawsuits, is that if everyone knows it's okay, everyone's not spending a lot of money yet. I mean, it may feel like it, but they're not. This is the next step after this is huge. So it'll be really interesting to see. It'll take 4 or 5 years for it to sort itself out. So we can talk about this for a while. We'll get a question like this once a week, and we'll just keep giving you updates. Next question.
John Richardson in Florida asked, stupid question. Maybe I'm missing something. I use AI occasionally for graphic stuff, but what are you guys using all this AI for?
Go ahead, John.
Using Midjourney every day. I'm doing a lot of presentations lately, and all of my graphics and all of my presentations are done mostly in Midjourney. And then the generative AI in Photoshop for removing stuff. My mom sent me an old photo of her and her family, and I had to remove a shadow across multiple people. Spectacular. And I'm told it's really good at removing watermarks, but I'm not sure about that.
Go ahead, Chris.
I can concur. It will remove a watermark. I'm the biggest, stick in the mud when it comes to this whole AI thing. I use it for set extensions. If I have a Zoom call that was shot a little tight, or let's say I want to put a box over my shoulder here, and I can just draw, as long as the body doesn't go out of frame, I'll just make the frame wider and push the guy over. It's astonishing. What's really cool is I taught one of our producers about it. I said, hey, let me walk you through this. And I took her through it, and she was like, oh. And like a week later, I saw some of her comments to some of the other editors. She's like, yeah, I think we need to do a set extension to the left and put the box over the shoulder. And I was like, oh, I've created a monster. Because exactly. I'm fairly certain that the editors that she was talking to don't know anything about generative fill. So yeah, I've created a monster. Good job, Sasha.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I'm using it for web development. I've got over 100 websites, so I'm hoping that it'll help me with my workflow. And I'm also using something called rewind.ai. It tracks everything I do. It tracks everything I write, everything I do on video. It's on my iPhone. It's on the Mac. Unfortunately, it's not on the PC yet. Not on the PC. So It's an amazing piece of software.
Yeah, for me, most of what I do is Midjourney, and I mostly do it for my presentations. So I make little things over white, and so I have these little characters and things, and it just makes it a lot more fun. And it looks like you had a team building all this stuff, as opposed to you just throwing things together, and it happens really fast. So that's what I use it for mostly. But then I also use ChatGPT to. I just made soup. My ChatGPT soup is so good, so I just finished a huge vat of it last night, and we had it for dinner. And then the other thing that I use it for is to think about things. Like, I'll ask it things like, "Tell me about this." And what I love doing is going, like, my daughter asked me something. I said, Richard Feynman explaining quantum mechanics to a fifth grader. Like, so here's your reference point. Here's what you're going to explain. Here's your target. Like, and when you set that target, when you do that, it will give you incredible results. And so those are the kind of things that I do a lot of. And I do a lot of explaining to a fifth grader, even on something I know what it is, because it helps me figure out how to say it in a different way. Like I had to do a blockchain one. I think I read it at some point on one of these shows, and John concurred that it was accurate. And it was like explain blockchain to a fifth grader, and it was just said, it just explained the chain perfectly, in simple terms. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, I've been experimenting with Bing Chat powered by GPT-4, and I'm blown away by the quality and detail of its output in comparison to GPT 3.5 or Google Bard. Why do you think GPT-4 is so much better?
Go, John.
I don't think it's much better, and it doesn't have the internet integrated into it like Bard does. And so if you're looking for later stuff, you're going to find Bard produces better results. What I do now is I run Bard, GPT-4, and then also Claude. And then I usually get a consensus amongst the three. 2 out of 3 LLMs say, I did it yesterday. I was researching a very complex mathematical equation for my presentation next week, and 2 of the 3 LLMs came up with the right answer. And so I use all 3 and then mash together physically. And GPT-4 is just a little bit better than Bard is right now for results.
Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois, looking for your opinion on an HDMI cable signal amplifier for long runs. I'm considering the Legrand C2G inline extender. What are your thoughts?
Go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
I looked at it. It looks okay. It depends on, I guess, which end of the cable you put it on. It's just a little box with an HDMI in and an HDMI out, and it passes the HDCP along. It does require power, I think.
Yeah, it's a point of failure. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't put this in the middle of my feed. If it loses power, if it loses anything, it loses connection, I would get a cable. You can get cables for HDMI that go a long way, self-amplified, fiber cables and so on and so forth. And I would do that, or I'd convert it to SDI and go before I would amplify an HDMI signal. Next question.
From Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. Given how popular Sony cameras are, would Blackmagic Design do way better if they supported remote control of other makes of cameras such as the Sony? Blackmagic Design doesn't seem too responsive to requests like this, unfortunately.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I don't think it would make business sense for them to go out of their way. And plus, all the other cameras in the world, that's a big task. So I think they're doing the right thing with what they have.
Trying to integrate with other people's. The big advantage that Blackmagic has is it owns everything, so it doesn't have to ask for permission to do things and make things work. It would just be it'd be really painful for Blackmagic to do that. I don't think there's any chance that they would even think about it. Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado. Does iOS and or iPadOS have features that use timecode audio, Jamsync?
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Probably not accurately. They may do it. They may be able to jam sync to the internal clock, but it's not a crystal-controlled oscillator, so it's not going to stay in sync for very long unless it's continuously jam sync. There are several applications that you can download for the iPad that will display timecode, which is great because you can send timecode into the audio input jack on them and get you make like a timecode slate out of it. So it'll decode and display timecode. So those are handy, and when you unplug the timecode from them, some of them might keep it running, but they're using that internal clock, which it isn't crystal controlled. Isn't temperature control crystal.
Yeah, I think it's Movie Slate is the one that, or Film Slate, one or the other. I can't think of it at the moment. I can't open it that quickly, but that does have time code. To Courtney's point, you'd have to continually feed it with a tentacle or something else to keep it in sync. But it will do that in it. And if you use it, a lot of times we use it when we don't have time code. We have it run time code so that all the cameras look at it and everything else, and it makes a little noise and it allows us to resync things later if we had to. Next question.
Next one in from John Richardson in Florida. If I want a decent low-end VR camera to shoot trade show stuff for Oculus, what do you recommend? Stepping up from Samsung cameras. Don't laugh.
Yeah, the Theta is really good. It depends on how much you want to spend, but the Thetas, I have the Theta V, I think, is the one that I use. I think it's around $1,000, and so it's not super high end. And then the other ones, the Insta360s, are really good. So I would take a look at the Insta360s, and then finally GoPro makes one, but the render time is really long on the GoPro, at least in my opinion. But the GoPro makes a 360 camera as well. Those are the ones that mostly live in that kind of sub $1,000 range or sub $1,500 range. And if I was going to pick one right now, I'd probably get the Insta360. I have a Theta because I bought it a long time ago. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. In After Hours yesterday, we were marveling at the Innovativ Deploy Workstation, which is a mobile 19-inch rack with bicycle-like tires. What's your comment?
There's a lot of them like that. So this is not, it may look new for if you don't see them a lot, but there's tons of these out there. We're going to keep moving because we're going to try to get through a couple more questions, but it's a good rack. It's a good rack. There's a lot of audio racks that look like that though. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, the surplus Dell PowerEdge R430 server. It has two PCIe 3.0 slots. Could an NVIDIA RTX 4000 series card fit in it?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that because I don't do a lot of blades with big. Usually when we get, so the issue is that usually when we're doing this, we throw in a lot of, we put them in bigger boxes. So I don't usually put them in blades. So I think that PowerEdge is a blade, I believe. And so I usually put them in larger boxes to do the processing that we need. They're usually like 5U if turned sideways kind of thing. So I think that I don't know if this one will work or not. Quick reminder that, of course, we've got tomorrow we've got audio day brainstorming. So we'll be figuring out what do you want to hear more of and how do you want to make that work. So stay tuned for that and definitely come with your ideas. So this time you're going to use your questions as a way to suggest things that we should look at. We're not answering questions about audio in the second hour. We are suggesting things that we can talk about for a whole second hour in the second hour of tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be kind of spreading those out. We've done them all in 1 week in the past, and it's been a little too much. So we're doing it we're doing it in a different way this time. And then on Thursday we'll talk about camera rigging. So how do we get all this? Like this is a good example. How do we rig this stuff up and how do we tie it all together? What are the tools that you need? So we'll talk about camera rigging there. Of course, Friday, we're still working some stuff out with that, but Saturday and Sunday, we'll have 2 hours of Q&A. And of course, always a reminder that Sunday is a little bit of an introspection. So we usually take a little bit more time, a little bit of the show that was an introduction to what Sunday's like. I was just wandering around answering questions there. So definitely join us for that. And a reminder that the radio app is out there. You can download if you go to Discord under the announcements. You can make that actually happen. And now we're going to go without further ado. We're going to get ready to go into the second hour. And we are now starting up the second hour. And we have Nick Jushchyshyn here. Hey, Nick.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back. And this is it's a nice set there. Is the set real?
This set is not real. This is what it looks like in the room.
There we go. So anyway, Nick and I, of course, spent. If you haven't seen it, we wandered around SIGGRAPH a couple weeks ago, which was fantastic. Just wandered around looking at it, so definitely check that out. And Nick, what are we talking about today?
I thought I'd bring in some samples of photogrammetry and iOS LiDAR. So these are like off-the-shelf consumer technologies and how you can use those results in a production flow to bring them into Unreal Engine. And then you can do pre-visualization or rendering. And so I thought I'd kind of show how I use those things together to put a scene together.
Well, go ahead. Let's see. And what are you using right now for your, when you're talking about phone LiDAR, there are a couple different options there. What have you found to be the most useful?
So I bounce back and forth between an iPad Pro, which actually I got in 2019, 2020, I think. And I also I have an iPhone 14. So I would imagine that it's an iPhone 14 Pro. So I would imagine that each iteration of these devices gets better and better in terms of its optics and sensors and such. So I'm perfectly happy with my iPhone. I can remember when we used to talk about and debate about whether the cameras in the iPhone were good enough for video or photography. And it just got to be where, well, it's the device you have with you. And so now, as long as this is in my pocket, I have LiDAR with me. And lets me scan something three-dimensionally and measure it and have a reasonable degree of accuracy. And then I can bring that model through USDZ or FBX or OBJ into any of the 3D tools that I use for the rest of the workflow.
And the funny thing, I've been using it more and more. Polycam has been the one that I've been using, and I've been using it more in the sense that I find it to be remarkably accurate, like plus or minus like an inch, if I'm walking around. And I was surprised at how it is. And I've done I go to a venue. I went to a little bar that we were going to shoot in. And I wandered around, just walked all over the place. Now, you have to be kind of careful because as you get bigger and anything that has a lot of smooth surfaces, I have trouble with, because it stops registering. Like registration is, I don't know if you've had that problem, but registration for me in large spaces is the hardest thing.
That in dark spaces. So it's not just the LiDAR itself, it's also using the optical imagery. So I'm using a free app called 3D Scanner app. It's a little purple pinkish icon that looks like a little house. And so it's free from the App Store. And one of the nice things about it is that it's simultaneously capturing photos while it's capturing the LiDAR. And it uses the photos to essentially register the three-dimensional data that the LiDAR is detecting with more accuracy. But it's also using the IMU. And so if you travel a long distance, you can start to introduce kind of like a creeping error over time. So some of I've LiDAR scanned a fountain garden that covers multiple acres. And it was just take it in little bites. And then I'll use a 3D app. I usually use Maya, but Blender would be perfectly suitable to take all the individual scans and put them together. And they are remarkably accurate. Using that method, I could compare to Google Maps or a drone flight photogrammetry, and everything lines up really, really well.
Can you show us some examples?
Sure. So let's see if I can share my screen. I'll share desktop here. And I think one thing that I have, let's see this. Okay. So this is just an NDI stream feed from my iPad. So this is what the 3D scans look like in the iPad after they've been fully processed. So this is outside in daylight. You can see the sun shining and giving me shadows and bright areas. And I walked through this space and up the stairs to the doorway and then around this patio. And mainly I was interested in the patio floor and the wall. And I want to be able to measure those things. So I can, once I have this scan, I'm pretty comfortable that if I hit measure and tape measure, that if I tap on the corners of this door, that 4 feet wide, that now I know how wide that is. And so that's kind of the reference that I would use later on down the line in a 3D app. I would load this in and I would make sure that the two corners of this door are scaled such that that's 4 feet. And then I could test anything else that I'd like to check. So for example, the distance between a couple of these posts on the patio. Okay, so those are 8 feet apart. So right away, I'm already getting a lot of information from this. Even before I've put it into a 3D app or Unreal Engine, I can already do location scouting with this. And so that's really handy.
And I think that's one of the important things here is that you get into the one of the things that's really important is that a lot of times we go there and we used to go in and measure. I have a laser measure. I still take to things to measure a couple key aspects or whatever. So I walk away with those widths and so on and so forth. We used to measure. When you do this, you can measure later in the comfort of your own home, and you're not sitting there waiting with the person who gave you access to go through it. It's just a much more straightforward process, in my opinion, to do this. And so it's really valuable to get good at this. And we've seen a lot of people sometimes. it can be a little. I'm trying to find my. You saw me running around. I was trying to pull up some stuff, but it can be not perfect, but it really being able to see again like what you're showing there, which is like, oh, this is 8 feet. I don't know if we're cutting to Nick's. I'm looking at his screen. Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
And so being able to just identify that stuff is super useful.
Absolutely. And in this case, like with this doorway, if we had a lot of equipment to get into this building, which was, this was built in 1730 or something like that. Okay, well, this is how much space we have to get through that door. And this, again, as you said, if there's limited access to a space, you could go in weeks, months in advance and do a lot of this scanning. And then you can always go back to those scans anytime you want for further reference. So, this is a, historical building in Chadsford, Brandywine area. And there was a lot of detail that we're building essentially a 3D documentary about this. Another thing that I've done with this is scan like a close-up just of this brick pattern. And because we have photos, I should be able to go here and somewhere in here, view scan images. So I have all of the individual photos here. So after the fact, not only do I have the scan, but I have these photos that I could give to my photogrammetry software and come up with a even more accurate, more highly detailed 3D model, because the scan is based primarily on the LiDAR. And so if I were to go and look at, I forget if I have a way here of seeing the amount of topology that there is on here. Here it is, wireframe. Okay, so this is pretty good when it comes to wireframe. I'm getting, basically a row or 3 rows of faces inside the even just the mortar in between these bricks. So that's nice. But photogrammetry would be able to take a look at the grain of this grout texture, and you're actually not quite seeing it at full resolution that I am, but this grout, all of the shadows and nooks and crannies, photogrammetry software will go in and find all that geometry and actually generate a very highly detailed model. And then I can use this patch to essentially texture the entire outside of a CG model of this building. So I also have, we scanned, in the documentary we're creating, we're not even really using the interior of the house, but while we were there, we scanned the interior as well. I'm just trying to see if I can find. While
you're looking at that, I'll show you a little bit of. This is one of the venues that we went to, so here's this is my iPhone, and what you can see is I just walked around with my phone and captured this, and so we were able to, we can get in there, and it's not, of course, it's not high enough resolution for a film, but I can sit there and go, well, show somebody like this is the. I can talk to someone and say, this is where we're going to go through here. But it's not just a photo. The big thing is that I find that when I'm doing these, let me get this back a little bit. When I'm trying to explain to someone what a space looks like or where we might go, having photos is sometimes hard to understand what the space actually looks like. And so being able to grab something like this, I can say, what we want to do here is I want to put a camera here. I'm going to put another camera over here. I'm going to do one over here. And then I can go, but let's go up like this, and here's where those cameras will be. And we can keep on talking about those things in a way that is just very hard to do if we, and in this case, we were building, some people watching this probably recognize this, but we were like, this space, we measured this space out, so we measured like these areas here, and we realized we could put some tables in here. And so we decided, this is a really great central place. So we're going to put our audio over here, and we're going to put our video over here, and it's this nice central thing. And we were able to, but we figured that out after we visited. Like we just wandered around, shot all these images, and then figured out this is how we're gonna actually put it together. And I'll hand it back to you, Nick.
Yeah, sure. So if we go back to my screen share, I have a scan up here of the room that is on the other side of that patio door we were looking at. So I don't know if this is showing yet or not, but Are you guys seeing?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, all right. So here's this doorway.
A much cleaner version than what I just showed.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty good. So on the inside of this door, I've got 37 inches, and this also shows me, all right, there's encroachment. So you can't just take a long. If this bench is anchored in some way, then it's going to be really hard to turn this corner, because we've only got about 3 feet by 4 feet here on the inside to work with. So stuff to keep in mind. And the other thing that comes up is, like, if we were going to be shooting in here, one of the questions that maybe I didn't think to look at when I was going through, you only have a few minutes, scan the place, excuse me, is where are we getting power? So I can look here and get a sense for, all right, it looks like there might be power behind these panels because there's lights here. And oh, wait a minute, right there, there's a power outlet next to the door across there. So we might be able to use that. Or, this might warrant a phone call and ask, okay, I'm seeing only one circuit. I don't know how many amps that is. We're going to need X, Y, and Z, or do we need we want to park a generator outside. And, these are kind of things that we can look at after the fact, having been there, and solve those issues without having to continually go back over and over again. Looks like there's actually a hidden outlet right there. So just right there. So anyway, that's LiDAR, and it works really well inside, and it works outside in sunlight. It doesn't work well in the dark. It doesn't work well with smooth, shiny surfaces, because the imagery in the process is being used for the registration to combine everything, right? So if we're looking at these scanned images, they're sideways, but these are the actual photos that were being taken. And in the LiDAR process, oh, look, there's another outlet right there on the bottom of that right there. The photos are being used to register and build out this 3D model. And so the optical pattern here in this corner and this corner, that's going to be unique. And the software is going to match that up by photo by photo by photo with the depth from the LiDAR transmitter receiver, and ultimately create that textured 3D model from that.
Courtney, you had a question?
What is the accuracy of that measurement? Most of the stuff you've been showing has been like 8 feet, 4 feet. How accurate can it get based on the LiDAR? And then does it use, like if the LiDAR says, okay, there's a wall over there and it's 15 feet wide, but you want to know, how far is this picture from this picture? Does it then use the bitmap overlay to calculate the distance between those two based on the scale of the wall?
So it's extremely accurate with objects that are in, say, 2 feet, 3 feet out to about 8 to 10 feet away, that are facing perpendicular to the scanner. So in this particular view, for example, the measurement, if I was pointing at this fireplace, that 4-foot measurement is going to be quite accurate.
The nearest foot, really? It's exactly 4 feet.
It'll be within an inch or two.
It's within inches.
It's really accurate.
Question about the accuracy. Yeah, like if you wanted to measure the distance between those two pictures in the wall, could you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, from this particular view, now, okay, that's 7 inches. I probably didn't tap it in the right spot. So let me clear.
I wouldn't build a fitting. I wouldn't ask Chris to build a fitting to fit a piece of wood between there or something, or wrap around it based on this measurement. But if you had something that was 6 or 7 inches and you saw that, you know that you're pretty good. If you had something that was 6 inches, you had a pretty good chance it's going to fit between those two.
So it might be just to the nearest inch in a big room scan like that. Yeah.
I am conservative. Yeah. I'm conservative to say that it's within the inch. My experience has been that it's much better than that. Like it's a probably 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch at least. Sometimes as much as an 1/8 of an inch. It really is a very accurate LiDAR. And so that's been my experience, but I wouldn't build against that. I would, trust but verify. When we, even with our high end scanners, I have a higher end scanner. It's a low end LiDAR scanner, but a high end compared to the phone. And even that, we're talking, in this room, it would probably be plus or minus 3 or 4 millimeters. Like it wouldn't be any more accurate than that.
So the new Carpenter setting would be LiDAR once, measure twice.
Yeah, but when you're thinking about blocking things out and making things work, it's really, really useful.
Yeah, and to enhance the accuracy, it's not like I just stood in the middle of the room and waved the iPad around. I walked around the space. And again, one of the points I wanted to make is objects that are facing the scanner, are left to right, up and down, are going to have high accuracy because of the angle differentiation between something left and right of the center of the lens, up and down from the center of the lens. That's really accurate to measure. If I stood in one place, say I stood in this doorway right here, and I scanned the room just from that, like in a fan kind of a motion, and I scanned left to right, etc., the accuracy front to back might not be so good, right? Because the difference between 15 foot away and 15 and a half foot away might be less than 1 degree of differentiation from the center of the lens. So the subtle angle difference as you move distance wise could be inaccurate. But again, that's solved by walking around the space. So I didn't stand in that doorway and scan. I faced the fireplace and then walked around here and scanned in there and walked around here. And so this was assembled from a variety of scans. And so I'm pretty confident with this 15-foot measurement. And I would certainly be confident within 2 to 3 inches. It's probably within an inch. So.
And also it is, we had one where we had a couple 9 days before an event in DC. We were given a part of a hallway to build a set into, and we went in there and we had someone measure it, and they came back and we built a SketchUp model, and then that SketchUp model was off by a couple inches, and everything, by 4 or 5 inches, and everything was like nothing fit together when we showed up because it was in such a rush. This would have fixed a lot of that, because we would have just dropped that SketchUp model in and gone, oh, that doesn't fit. Is it accurate enough to do, again, fine modeling, fine like fitting? No, but is it enough to be really sure that you're pretty darn close, within that range? I think it's pretty exciting for those of us who've had to do this, and it's way better than us sitting there measuring all those, like all the measurements in that room. How long would it have taken me? An hour to get everything I needed out of that. Instead, it's 5 minutes of wandering around, and you're done. You move on. So
yeah, and I was able to walk around the entire first floor of this structure, and it's really, again, exploring a historical structure like this. This particular room is one of the original rooms that was built in 1730. So this is almost 300 years old, and being able to see that then combined and dropped in with our exterior scans is really exciting, which I guess is another thing I can kind of show is the other side of this is then using photogrammetry to capture larger spaces. Now, I'm on campus. Most of this work is in my home office. So I did some screen capture here. So I'm just kind of scrubbing through a timeline to show the alternative approach. And this is a photogrammetry software called Capturing Reality. And so this 3D model of the exterior of that house is created by flying a drone around it. So you can kind of see these little pyramid shapes here are individual photos that were taken by a drone. And those photos.
And what drone?
Oh, it's a knockoff. It's not a DJI. It's a Autel.
Okay.
Star or something.
So a little, what, $200 or $300 drone?
These days, yeah. I mean, it would not be an expensive drone. It shoots Ultra HD video, and it shoots photos that are about that resolution, but you can shoot RAW. And were you
shooting photos or video?
So I used to only shoot photos, but I've discovered, particularly with the Capturing Reality software, that it works really well with Ultra HD videos. So I had used other tools before that just really struggled with video frames. And I think that was because the EXIF data that you would get with a photo that tells you this is the make and model of the camera, this is the lens length that I had, et cetera, was being used by the software to help inform its solutions. It turns out with capturing reality, you can drag and drop an MOV or MP4 file right into it. Say, yeah, I want to use this.
And it'll just... Is this capturing reality or is this reality capture?
So capturing reality is the company. Reality capture is the software.
Got it.
Not confusing at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And they have a different tool for iPhones now. That's I forget what it's called. It's
like reality
capture something.
Yeah, and it. I've had some pretty good results with that. It is still a little hit and miss for the iPhone stuff, but when it works really well. I took some stuff where it was like picking up the texture of the rust, kind of stuff. It was really, really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so reality capture software on a PC is my go-to photogrammetry at this point. And so this was a single drone flight here. And my intent was just to capture this building. But along the way, I accidentally captured, like there's a structure over here that's like a carriage house or something. And it got captured. It's there it is. It's over here in the background. And what's crazy is that we have like blueprints. This part of the building was constructed in around 1914. So it's a little over 100 years old at this point. And there's an underground tunnel that goes to this. And we have the blueprints for the construction project. Right. And laying that blueprint, like a hand-drawn, genuinely blue blueprint over this scan, lines up the structure and this building and the tunnel like perfectly. I mean, it was at that moment, and it was then that he knew. Yeah, this is what he would do for the rest of his life.
And one of the things that's really useful is when you get that other building, then you go over and shoot that building, and now you have a reference point. You have a keystone that you can take that higher res model. So if you went over and got that second house, you'd be able to get that high res, and you know how to lock it back in.
Exactly. And we can use all of this other material for reference. And again, this is something where I could have taken an individual measurement of the distance between these arch feet, but I did a LiDAR scan of that. And so then I was able to scale this scan based on LiDAR of just this doorway. And what's interesting is these three doorways are narrower than these three. It's just, it's like, I thought like something's wrong here. Something's wrong. No, it's literally forced perspective. So this then becomes its own 3D model. And this software lets me do things like I could select all of this shrubbery and such and just delete it out.
A lot of times I clean up a lot of the errata on the outside just to make it looks much nicer that way.
And it's more digestible. I mean, there's points there. And so this is what that model looks like in Maya. So when it's loaded into Maya, fully textured, this is that house inside Maya. And then I also, like this side of the house, I didn't get in that flight. So I went back on a different day and, flew the drone around this side. And I had to actually wait until the leaves fell. Like when I did the first flight to capture most of the house, there were just too much on the trees that I couldn't really see. And so, again, like I could just take that and scan it. And so this is a highlight of that second scan and how that fits right in with everything else. And then you can see like the porch that I went around and LiDAR scanned, that's all of this right here. And that the doorway that was there and so on and so forth. And I can line this up with, and then the process here is like, I want to bring this into a real-time tool. And so I'll create a low polygon model, right? So this is millions of polygons, millions of faces from the photogrammetry. But if I create just a a cube and then subdivide it and punch holes in it, now I'm down to something like, 200 faces for this whole wall, and that's double-sided. So, I have openings for the doorways and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And I can show here's more of like now what the low polygon modeling.
And a lot of times you can build this in Maya. A lot of times you can build it in Blender. You can build it in Cinema 4D. We use SketchUp a lot for these kinds of things. So we take our scans and use SketchUp to build a lot of those things out, just because it builds a nice light model for us to work with.
Exactly. And everything is being built. In this case, in Maya, this locator is my origin, 000 XYZ. And so everything's being built from that. And that origin is in the center of this exterior archway. So I have LiDAR of this archway. I have photogrammetry flight data from this archway. And I can combine it all here in Maya to scale. And then when I build a structure, this is what the structure of the house looked like when it was originally built in 1730, based on the architectural information. And there was a historical architect went through and kind of analyzed where the molding was and all this. Like, okay, this is the original structure. And so I have that geometry.
And then you're taking all of this and bringing it into Unreal?
Right. So that model looks like this in Unreal. So there we go. And so this is that brick pattern applied to that low polygon materials. And some of the ways this gets separated out is that here in Maya, you'll see that like the top of these steps I've marked in red. And so that's a really just a basic solid color material that's red. And then this is blue. And all this is doing is designating that the faces of this model that are red are going to get a different material than the blue faces. In
Unreal, you're selecting by face color.
Exactly. So where the foundation of the building and the walls are separate 3D models, this is a single 3D model that I wanted to have multiple materials for. Same thing with the roof. Like I wanted to have shingling for the roof, but white trim. So I just designate with different color materials in Maya. And then that allows me to designate, okay, this is white paint and this is cedar shingling with a bunch of debris on it and so on and so forth. And
Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Nick, you mentioned that the pillars changed width. In which ones were the narrow ones?
Yeah, so it's not actually forced perspective. It's the narrow ones are in the center for some reason. The wider ones are out here, I think. It's a matter of like 6 inches difference. Actually, it's in the design. Let me see if I think at the end here I brought up. Yeah, here's one of the blueprints. Yeah, so
they designed it that way. They designed it to be a little thicker on the outside edges and a little thinner on the inside edges. Not the same.
Exactly. And so, so this is a hand-drawn blueprint from like 1910 or something like that. And, lined up with the 3D model and the roofs line up and everything. And, this kind of makes me giddy every once in a while. So I'm not good at golf, but this is.
So you don't think as somebody who does build things, I would think that they did that on purpose to make it look larger.
Could be. It could be a bit of forced perspective that maybe that allowed. It could have been that, they wanted a center piece and they wanted 4 archways on either side. And, the center one had to be a certain width in order to be, I don't know, standard in order, this was going to be the main entrance or whatever. But in order to fit all of these in, they just needed to take a few inches off of the outer ones. I mean, I don't know what the thinking was there, but
the fact that they drew it all out said that they were planning ahead.
It was a financial. I mean, not financial. It was a visual thing, like a perspective thing that they're
definitely
trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the next question I had is when you were showing the scan on the inside of the building, the inside of the room, if you were scanning a smaller space, would the measurements be more accurate or less accurate? I'll give specifically, I want to scan the inside of like a 4Runner, a Toyota 4Runner, the rear hatch area, because I want to build something that's going to fit inside the rear hatch of a 4Runner.
Yeah, I would think that would be very accurate to within less than an inch. I think that the accuracy.
Less. Do you call less than an inch very accurate?
Well, talking to someone who does woodwork, he's like, yeah.
That's somebody who's building.
I do metal
with
work.
a chainsaw.
With a milling machine, I'm dealing with thousandths of an inch, and so, I don't think you're going to be within thousandths of an inch, but I think. When I think of carpentry, I think that if you measured that and it said that it was, 49 inches wide, it's definitely going to be more than 48 inches wide.
Chris is like, he's going to throw a glove at you.
Anyway, I know.
Yeah. Anyway, but the I will say
measure
that
3 times.
My experience is like doing small things. So one of the things I use Polycam for is if I want to print something about, that's going to fit something, what I do is I use Polycam to get a quick model of it. And then I build something in Cinema 4D and then I print it and then I see how close I am. And usually for a small object, like a switcher or something else like that, it's plus or minus a millimeter or two. Like it's really like when you're dealing with a small object that's right in front of it, it's actually very, very accurate. And the larger ones, because it really depends on how far away the camera is. The LiDAR on the iPhone becomes less accurate as Nick said, as it gets further away. So I find that if you're within a couple feet of the object while you're scanning it, the accuracy is very high. For the LiDAR.
And another solution there, what we would normally do if that level of accuracy is critical is to put what we would call calibration objects into that space as well. So we might put, black and white.
Like a banana?
No, not a banana for scale.
Unless it's very exact. It could be very small banana.
If it's a very exact banana.
Exactly. It's a calibration.
If only we had a universal banana measurement.
Let's jump into the questions because we got them stacking up and then we'll come back. Yeah, so let's go to the first question.
From Peter Buck in San Francisco asking, imagine using LiDAR for sports analytics, picture tracking player movements and positions in real time, identifying trends, and unlocking new insights on athletic performance, fantasy or reality?
So there are solutions that are doing that reality now. I don't believe they're using LiDAR. They're generally using either, radio transmitter trackers, so there'll be a device that the players are wearing that's helping track them, and or the video is being analyzed after the fact with machine learning software to track the players through the scenes.
Next question.
Ed Willick from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Nick, have you used LiDAR to create Vectorworks or SketchUp drafts? If so, what needs to be done to take the raw LiDAR scans to convert them to a file for Vectorworks and SketchUp that can be opened? I don't have a lot of exposure to LiDAR, but find this case interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So in this particular app, and I would think that most of the LiDAR apps have this. In this app, it's the share button, and this is all the formats that this particular software is able to support. So STL is here, and I usually export either FBX or OBJ or USD, or I'll select all data. And whoops, that was not what I wanted to do. Didn't want to do that. If I hit all data, it'll actually collect all of the photos, all of the depth data, and it's using OBJ format, which is fairly universal. And so then I'll end up with a zip file that I can upload to my OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever other apps, and then access it from computers. So that's ultimately how you get that out, is a zipped file package.
And the cool thing is that we I do OBJ most of the time when we're going to SketchUp, but if I want to send it to someone, I can export it out as a USDZ and literally text message it over messages. And if you have an iPhone on the other side, when they get that and they tap on it, it will pop up at scale. like it will like if you give it a yard, it will take that whole building and just set it in front of you, and you can walk around it and everything else. It's kind of amazing. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, currently I have an iPhone 14 Plus I got from a Verizon promotion. For someone wanting to get into LiDAR photogrammetry, should I get an iPad Pro or trade the Plus in for a Pro Max?
Go ahead, Nick.
So it's personal preference. I mean, you definitely need a Pro model iOS device. Those are the only ones that have the LiDAR built into them. I find having the one in my phone to be it's always with me. So, I was part of managing a pretty big conference a few weeks ago. And so when I location scouted the space in April before for planning purposes, I was able to LiDAR scan just with the phone. So I guess my preference, if I had to choose between the two, would be to get the phone, because then I'll just know that it's always with me. But it's not necessary. If I had a phone that didn't have LiDAR, and I was due for it, I had other uses for an iPad, I'd probably go with the iPad Pro and just make sure I had it with me anytime I needed to do any scanning.
Yeah, I started with iPads and with the iPad because that's what came out first, and I found that the phone was so much easier to wield. Like to make it work. Paul?
Yeah, I have a Pro Max 14 Pro Max. It works great. I'm using it with the Matterport scanner, and for the first time I ever tried to do it, I figured, well, this isn't going to work. I'll just play around with it, and I took it around the room. Didn't read the instructions. It came out perfect. So you can do great stuff with 14, any model 14.
Next
I will
question.
note.
Oh, go ahead.
Before the next question, I was just going to note that one of the big utilities of the iPad form factor is that it's much easier to show others what you've just scanned. Mm-hmm. And so, scenarios where I'm going on site and there's somebody responsible for that site, like, what is it that you're doing here? It's much easier to show somebody what you're doing with a large screen of the iPad. But if it's just for my own use, then either one works fine.
Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and right here in our panel, can Matterport scans be exported to Unreal Engine? And what's the workflow to do that?
So you have to subscribe to Matterport's, subscription service in order to do that. But then you're able to upload your Matterport scans to their cloud service and ultimately export them in transferable formats. I forget what formats they support, but I expect OBJ is one of them. But you can't do it with just the scanner, like just the camera scanner device. Like you have to have their subscription service in order to do that file transfer.
I think the big advantage of Matterport is the fact that it's keeping track of it and stitching those back together into a tour. So like when you shoot, I find myself missing that when I don't use the Matterport, is that you are now kind of having to figure out how to stitch them all together. What Matterport's really good at is if you take your phone and you take that little head that they have, you can go through it, and it's like the older box that I used to own. So I used to have like a $5,000 Matterport that we would take to places before we had a real scanner, and we would just go through it. And even now, it's easier to use the Matterport. If I want to build a tour of a location, it was easier to use a Matterport than it was to use like a BLK 360. There's a lot more work to be done, on the BLK than it is on the Matterport. And there was some kind of conversion. I don't think it continued, but there was a conversion for a while where BLK 360 could extend what the Matterport does, because the Matterport itself, the hardware, is not very good at outdoor. But the phone is fine.
Leica's added a lot of functionality to the BLKs and their entire suite. Like, so they even have now a drone mounted version of that. Yeah. And so their software has actually gotten quite good at being able to stitch those things together. And I mean, but those, those are thousands of dollars. And so, yeah, absolutely. If I had that budget, or if I was working on a project with a budget that supported that, that would be the way to go.
Or even just going somewhere. Like I can't take that everywhere. So being able to just have something that's in my pocket that I can pull out and grab some data is pretty useful. Courtney?
I was going to ask about these small, like Matterport, or these smaller handheld scanners. Do they actually use LiDAR, time of flight LiDAR, or do they use a projected infrared pattern and then gauge the pattern's reflection off of the object to gauge, or does it use just photogrammetry where it just doesn't project anything onto the object itself? And I have another question about drones, but if you can answer the first question first.
I would say in the case of the iOS Pro devices, they're using
time of flight LiDAR.
Yeah,
right?
they're using
I'm talking
time of
about the other handheld that have two sensors. There's a wide variety.
I don't know about Matterport. I mean, definitely the BLK and the Leica LiDARs are genuine time of flight LiDAR. I never really looked into. I don't have a Matterport, one of those big boxes. So, my impression is that it is LiDAR.
And the other question is, when you're doing a drone photography for scanning the outside of the house, does it incorporate the GPS data, the metadata from the drone's flight, actual flight, its positional data, height, and GPS?
I think it's possible, but my solutions were not doing that. So when I was running the drones through the captured reality software, it was not using GPS data. And actually,
there's just solving more based on the image. It's solving
purely based on the image. And there's far more detail in the images than there is in GPS data. So, and the accuracy is much higher when you're, the machine learning tool set is able to differentiate between like the different patterns of colors around these leaves and such. And so, it's able to be extremely accurate. Whereas GPS is going to be accurate to within several inches at best.
Yeah, and we'll spend some time talking about RTK drones and somewhere in the future so that they can get pretty accurate. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, Nick, it's incredible how responsive the NDI feed is from your iPad. How are you getting at such smooth video? I'd think Wi-Fi would be a lot laggier.
Wi-Fi might be a lot laggier. I'm not using Wi-Fi. So this is actually, I wonder if I can switch my camera here. Okay, so I'm like really small in here, and my iPad is here, and my MacBook is here, and they are both connected to Ethernet. And this is a Kensington docking station for the iPad, and so it's got all the hardware connectors in the back. I could even HDMI out the iPad over to the ATEM here on the desk as well if I wanted to. But so that's how it's working.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Any tips for a Matterport workflow where you've cycling models in and out of offline archival storage?
I don't know if you've dug that deep into it. I think the way to manage that is to. I don't think Nick does enough.
No, I mean, basically, yeah. If you get their base level subscription, you're only able to store so many models in your cloud account. And so, yeah, I mean, basically, you would want to get your scan in, get it uploaded, processed, and get all of that data back out, processed and in your standardized file formats, as well as you should be able to, in theory, get all of the imagery that the camera's captured as well, and then have that away. But I don't know that you will ever be able to re-upload that, from its processed format. Like you might probably have to re-upload.
And they have more expensive subscriptions that would then let you keep more of them up there. So I think that'd probably be the answer. I mean, if you really want to use the Matterport stuff, other than just passing it through, most of the time when we've used Matterport, we do exactly what Nick's talking about. We scan it, we export it, and then we delete it. It's only in that system for a minute. We're not using any of the Matterport tools. We're just trying to get the scans out of it. It's a nice organized way to grab things, for that process. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, could the same real-time display analytics concepts be applied to medical imaging data, CT, MRI, for example, if you could get the data into Unreal? Could you see Unreal Unity being part of medical imaging pipelines?
It's certainly possible. And I mean, you wouldn't even need something as powerful as Unreal for that. Technically, your CT scans and such are just pixel data and they're slices, right? So that can be processed by a tool like Houdini, for example, that could turn that into voxel geometry, meaning, instead of pixels, it's volumes instead of pixels. And then you've got a three-dimensional construct that you can work with. So, and there's specialized medical software that does do that. So,
the very first medical, like high-end medical models that we used to use a heart and I had to do these visualizations with hearts and with livers and other things. And the way that they did that was they had someone who was willing to be paid to give up their body after they passed. And they literally froze them and then took off a millimeter at a time, taking pictures. And then they had people sitting there by hand drawing outlines around the different organs and identifying them. I actually was in the office one time when they're sitting there with like a slice of a person, and they're sitting there, and what they had to do is trace each piece. And this is this is 30 years ago, but they had to trace each piece, and then they would identify what everything was. It was a painstaking process, and it took them years with multiple people to do it. But then they ended up with all these models that we used until, I think we still use them. Like the really high end scans, really high end models that a lot of us use for visualization. It's not a specific person, but it's good if you're trying to show a heart. Next question.
From John Richardson in Florida, John asks, is all the free software any good to do these days? What software is absolutely a must-have, and what kind of price tag can we expect to produce these results?
How much is reality capture?
So reality capture has a price per input pricing model. So you can download the software for free, fully capable, and even do the photogrammetry and get
price per output,
results.
Right? So you can.
No, it's price per input. So that's what's interesting. And so you would license effectively the results across the resolution of all these images. And so I think I might have looked at it, and I think this house, like this scan of the house, was less than $5 if I had that model. I have. You can also pay, it's a little over $1,000, I think, for just like a permanent license, and you just use it. And so that's the version that I have. But the price per input, PPI, is extremely accessible. Like you could scan somebody's whole head and face, and it'd be like less than $2. And I think this house would have been less than $5. And so what happens is that you license the processing data from these images, and then at that point you can export this in any number of the formats and use it in all sorts of ways. And so that, like, you can edit this and change it, et cetera. And so you can make as many outputs as you like. You've essentially licensed the processing of these images.
Yeah, and Metashape, I think you can download the demo; it'll work forever. It just can't export anything. Then you have to buy that to export it out, and that hasn't been too painful. I always tell people when they should learn that way. Just don't export anything. Just do it. Because I think this one, you don't pay for it until you want to export something, right? I mean, it's priced per input, but you don't pay until. So you could learn how to use reality capture without having to pay anything.
Without a single penny, exactly. And the results, like, again, this is Unreal Engine, right? And if I was doing location scouting, that's one of the examples that I was kind of throwing in here, is that I added a cinema camera, and let's say I wanted to do a shot on that porch. Yeah. I can frame up the shot the way I want it, select my lens. I think I've got like a 50 millimeter lens or something like that. Adjust my focus and aperture, and I can visualize all of that. And then when I'm done, I can actually find the exact location of that camera relative to my reference origin here.
Right.
And that's in centimeters. Like, I haven't parented it yet at this point in the video. And all of this Unreal Engine is 100% free for commercial use forever. So really,
for now, I feel like that can't last. It's a good idea.
They make their money other ways. It's just not their thing. I mean, you can download the source code and write your own software. And other people, like you look at Zero Density and
they're all doing.
There's a few others. They're all doing their own versions. But anyway, So these results absolutely, and I used Maya for my 3D modeling assembly just because I'm familiar with it, but Blender would be every bit as capable of doing that at no cost.
Next question.
Ed Willick from Grand Rapids, Michigan. For someone new to LiDAR, what are the commonly used scanners and their ballpark price points?
That one's for Alex. That one's for
Alex.
So
you're basically looking at, I mean, it starts to scale up. So there is a really small scanner I don't think is very good. The BLK, there's like a little one that's like $6,000, and I think it's mostly just photogrammetry, and which would be very hard for it to use. The BLK 360 version 2, I think, is about $20K, and that's when you really start having a true LiDAR scanner. There's some handheld ones that are in the $15,000 to $20,000. These are little. You can scan things, and that can be convenient inside of a factory experience, and so on and so forth. Then as you go up, you're going to probably start getting into the Pharaohs. The Pharaoh 350 is really popular, and I think it's depending on how you have it set up, somewhere between 35 and 50,000. And then above that, there's some other Leicas that are a little bit more expensive. There's also a ZNF. The ZNF is probably the most expensive one I've used, and it's about 85,000. I've never owned one, but I've used one, and it's incredible. I mean, it's accurate to. I don't know. I think it's accurate to half an inch at 500 feet or something like that. It's a really incredible, and it shoots, a couple million points a second. So it is a, anyway, so that's kind of the range. Again, for a lot of the stuff, especially when you're doing previs and so on and so forth, I find the BLK is a pretty good solution. I use that. Its software is really tricky. So it's getting things on and working with it is difficult. The Pharaoh 350 is the first one that you really feel like you have a professional scanner that does a really good job. Next question.
John Richardson in Florida. Have you done any 3D prints of these models?
Nick?
I haven't yet, but I do have I'm pretty sure my sister wouldn't watch the show. So I have a pet project that I want to, she has a getaway cabin in the Pocono Mountains, and I've done a drone flight. I've 3D modeled it. My intent is to 3D print it and make a snow globe of it. So I guess I got to get on that if I'm going to get that done in time as a Christmas gift.
I printed a statue. I thought it was kind of funny thing to do. I took a Shona sculpture and used photogrammetry to capture it, and then printed it just to see if I could print it. Obviously, the printed version was not nearly as nice as the real piece of stone, but it was an interesting way to kind of think about those processes, because one of the things I was interested in is the idea that you could have an artist who knows how to do one thing build something that's in their vision. They don't know how to build the other thing, and they could theoretically then do that. But I found it easier to just give the artists ZBrush. So anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, what would you recommend for learning Unreal Engine 5? Would the Epic first hour training be the best place to start?
I mean, that's certainly a great place to start. And I think that focus on basically just getting adjusted to what it does. That first hour will show you how to use the navigation tools, what each of these little panels is about. There's a thing called the Marketplace that it's both a website, is also built into the Unreal Engine launcher. So you could browse and download free scenery to get started with and just start moving things around and getting accustomed to it. That's usually when I'm teaching, I'll take a very similar approach as that initial hour. And I usually teach folks about moving the camera around and adjusting the camera. And so, definitely that first hour is a great place to start.
Last question.
From Paul Wallace, right here on our panel and in Austin, Texas. Can you evaluate my setup for Matterport scans?
Good, Paul.
Yeah, this is the setup here. This is the Matterport scanner. That's the top. This is the case that it comes in. It's a really cool case. Got a great
And Nick, have
manual.
you used the scanner?
Huh?
Have you used this setup, Nick?
I've used it.
No, I haven't
Nick.
used this setup. Yeah.
Looks
and
good.
then I have the main thing is the tripod. I want you to evaluate this as the tripod. It's a monopod, and it has a thing here. You can unscrew this and the feet come out. So just give me an evaluation and tell me how I can progress with Matterport to the next level.
The one suggestion I would have right off the bat, though, is maybe use a light stand with a 1/4-20 on the top rather than a monopod. The monopod tripod, even though those are usually, they should be steel feet, it's still going to be less stable than a light stand's tripod. Yet the light stand tripod is going to be less obtrusive than a genuine photography tripod. So the photography tripod is going to have the legs come together very close to the camera, whereas a light stand, the tripod it's much lower, but you'll get a better base for that apparatus to sit on. I haven't used this Matterport setup. Now, when you've got that set up, do you just hit go and then it kind of like robotically just does its pan and scan on its own without interruption?
Yeah, it doesn't like the Matterport.
Pretty much, yeah. It's off to the races, and then you move from spot to spot. And I think there's some kind of scientific way of where you position yourself and the distance between the spots that you use. What do you recommend, say, for a 1,000 square foot space? How many different shots would you take, Nick?
Well, I mean, I would do a minimum of 5, one from each corner, and then in the center of a space like that, at minimum. It could also be a grid of, I suppose you could do a grid of 4, where you're not putting yourself into the corner, but you're keeping yourself several feet from the walls of each corner, and so you're scanning each corner area. And then also, again, I prefer to get the center as well to kind of bring it all together. That might be overkill, though.
And this is the one that I use for a lot of that kind of thing, the lighter stuff. This is the ProMaster, I believe, makes this, and it's a light. It's a light stand. It's like an L. I can't read it here. Hold on, I can't find it. Oh, this is it. The LS-CT. This one unfolds. It folds up and it fits into a carry-on, which is important for me. It unfolds, and when the center goes up pretty high, so it gets away from the thing, it's easier to paint out. And I've used this all over the world, so I would highly recommend it. It's only about $80. We have one more question rolling in.
Okay, it's from John Fisher in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Where can someone get training to do this type of work for real estate and location scouting?
I think the internet's here. We're gonna do more doing stuff. I don't know if Nick has a specific answer to that one.
I mean, I don't know what it's like these days. I used to do that. That was one of my spackle, side gigs while I was working and breaking into feature films. Is like, and this was before Matterports were around. It was just pure spherical photography. And I would shoot HDRs, and there was a service company that I basically contracted for, and they would just send me out, and depending on how many rooms and spaces I was shooting, like that was the approach that I did, because the real estate companies had relationships with the service agency, and then the service agency would just send me out to a bunch of houses, and I'd upload the results, and everybody was happy.
I think the one thing to watch in this space is NERFs. When it comes to real estate, NERFs are going to be a huge deal, because they don't edit very well, but they're very easy to capture and generate compared to a lot of the other things. So it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. Thanks, Nick. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, so we'll have Nick on again sometime soon, hopefully. And it's really, really great to have you. And good luck with the new school season. I think it's just getting started, right? You're just starting to ramp up.
Getting ramped up. Yeah, we start our classes at the end of September, but I'm definitely, there's always new technologies coming out. I need to learn them to teach them. So it's busy.
Absolutely. And thanks to the producers for all the great questions that kept this hour running and the hour before it. Thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you, of course. And so I really appreciate your contribution here. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that makes this happen. There's a team that's producing this show. There's a team that's managing this show. There's a team that's developing tools for this show. And without which we'd still be back in a Zoom webinar. So anyway, so we've come a long way, and it's all of your fault. So anyway, so thank you so much for your contribution. And we've traveled in this day. We've traveled 36,000 miles. That's 59,000 kilometers. 290 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. Everyone's going to have to keep their eye out for the Alex listener. I'm almost done with it. I got a little speaker. I got a dedicated computer. Almost had it working yesterday. So
joined us for the show workshop today at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern.
Yes. What Mitchell
Blue Nerfs call. Snurfs.
Snurfs. So much drama in the Smurfs.
Alex, you should reach out to Mike, see if Mike can come on and talk about nerfs.
Yes, that is a good idea. Soon.
He's the Papa Nerf.
Yes, Papa Nerf. Someone's doing